welcome to Tea with Me. My name is Dawn Hudgins, and I'm the Vice President of Service Delivery for the International Legal Technology Association, also known as ILTA. And I have with me today Gillian Power as part of our Trailblazing series. Gillian, welcome.
Thank you, Dawn. It's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this series. Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you here. Let's just start off with a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, maybe where you work, what you do, and anything else you would like to share with us.
Dawn, I serve as the CIO at Lathrop GPM, which is a US-based law firm. We have 14 offices across the US, and I've had the opportunity to serve the firm in this capacity for going on the last 9 years, and have been uh, an active volunteer with ILTA for many years, goodness, going back to probably 2006, somewhere in
Okay.
that region.
Yeah.
Um, so, I've seen a lot of changes in ILTA as an organization. I've seen a lot of changes in technology, in the business of law, and myself in terms of my own um, path of growth and self-discovery. For those who are invariably wondering about my accent, I was born and I grew up in South Africa, and uh, left South Africa in my late 20s and moved to London. And that's actually where I first began working in legal technology. I got a job working at Denton's. It was Denton Wild Sapt at the time. Um, Started at the bottom, literally working at night, deploying Windows 95 PCs. And after 2 years, I moved to the United States, and have continued my career in legal technology. Um, and I guess I can call myself a veteran at this point. Um, I, you know, so I'm just very glad to be sharing some of my story, and hope that it can be of service and benefit to others. I think from an ILTA perspective, the area that I'm most active in right now, and am thrilled to be serving in this capacity. I co-chair ILTA's um, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Task Force. I do that alongside um, with Andy Morris, who's the CIO at Thompson Hines in Cleveland. Um, Sorry, I maybe, but yes, Cleveland. Yes, he's in Cleveland. I don't know Ohio that well, so um, I, I, I stagger on that. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of a background to give
Okay.
folks context.
Great. So let's just dive in. So, rarely do any of us arrive at our destination or at a pit stop along the road without having had epiphanies or learnings along the way that develop wisdom that should be shared. So, tell me a little bit about your path and maybe some learnings that you've had along the way that are good to share.
Certainly. Um, I'll actually go back to when I was in 10th grade in South Africa. I was selected to go on a leadership development course by my high school, and there was a speaker who came and spoke to all the kids from various high schools. And one of the things that he wanted us to do was to visualize our life as a timeline, and the point at which you would get married, the point at which you would buy a car, build a house, visualize the white picket fence. I remember that correctly. And I remember sitting in that, I couldn't have been 15 or 16 years of age, and going, I think that that's a bunch of rubbish, that you can actually be that certain about your life and create this vision. I'm sure some people do, but my nature told me that that would just feel entirely restrictive and utterly too predictable. So I use this as an example because the view that I've come to is to embrace every experience that comes to me, to adopt an attitude of willingness to learn, willingness to accept the obvious lessons and the hidden lessons within every situation, within every encounter, and candidly, almost within every moment, that there are just an infinite riches of opportunities for growth. And what I like about that is it keeps the orientation to being one of openness and receptivity and humility about what experience might come next. Certainly, as you know, as one develops experience and wisdom through the natural course of living, you do have good frameworks for understanding experiences, for understanding situations. But a framework is just a framework, and no framework is perfect, and no framework describes reality perfectly. So you have to be willing to modify or even throw out your points of reference or frameworks about how to navigate situations. And cultivating that attitude, I believe, lets us see potential, it lets us see opportunity, and it really is practically quite foundational for being innovative. In technology, it's very easy to recourse back to the tried and tested. In legal technology, we definitely have a challenge with who's going to go first. Especially in the CIO ranks, there's a lot of risk with going first, which I appreciate, and not everyone has to go first, and not everything's ready, ready yet to do that. But sometimes we do have to go first, and sometimes we do have to lead and show the way. In my personal life, I I've done this and have had huge learnings from doing this, and probably the the biggest part of that experience that many people are aware of was that in the 2014-2015 time period, I came out as transgender, and transitioned in my role as CIO. I was also at the time serving as the thought leader for ILTA, as one of the thought leaders for ILTACon. I had the incredible opportunity of serving alongside John Elber, who many people know as a great visionary, and managing that process of undergoing, for many people, what would be considered an absolutely foundational change in your sense of identity and sense of expression. And it has brought really unbelievable self-learning with regard to how I understand my leadership style, how I understand the world, how I understand diversity and inclusion and equity and gender and privilege and all of these things that play out that until that time were really just theoretical or not even very well understood at that time. But probably the biggest learning in that process is that it is paradoxical. It is apparently paradoxical, but it is possible to experience maximum vulnerability but maximum self-empowerment simultaneously. Because coming into my true gender expression within the world put me through a set of tests and trials with regard to being really at the mercy of other people's reactions and how it's going to be received. But also coming into myself and feeling very empowered to be living my truth and my authentic self and not having to feel like I was hiding who I felt myself to be inside. And it's a remarkable testament to the ILTA community that when the news came out that the the support and the receptivity that I received from so many people far and wide was just absolutely overwhelming. Positivity and experience. Certainly, there were, without a doubt, there were some people that it probably really challenged, because it wasn't something that had been visible before in a law firm or law technology situation. But a lot of people, I just found that even some of those people came around with time, and once they could see just how intrinsically happier I was and how much more present I was as a person, it was there. So, being very conscious that many transgender people face unbelievable opposition and difficulties in employment and their personal lives. Something like 87% of people who are in a long-term relationship and who come out and transition, they'll often lose the relationship, they'll lose their marriage. A lot of people lose employment. A lot of people get lose access and custody to children. There's just incredible sacrifice and suffering that many transgender people go through to essentially say to the world, I don't want to live a lie anymore, right? And that's very hard because it we all have a right to live our truth and to live our freedom, and for people to be judged and to experience suffering for essentially a statement of radical honesty doesn't make sense. So I do discussions like this, I do panel discussions, I do presentations and public speaking, because what I can be is I can just be a beacon of hope, a reflection for other people that they can make space for people that are different, people that don't fit into the normal categories that present themselves differently, and to see that those people also bring value and have value as value from a job point of view, from a skills point of view, but also intrinsic value as human beings. And I think in doing so, it does create space. It does change hearts. It does change minds. It does open up the way for other people, right? And that really gets us to this Trailblazer theme, in a sense, right? And when we were preparing for this call, an image came to me of saying, what is it to be a leader? Like, what's a good visual analogy to describe being a leader, right? And a leader is someone who on balance believes that there is, despite the risks that face one or a group or a team or an organization, despite the challenges that face it, that it is possible to imagine a better situation, an improved situation, and to take the methodical steps of actually realizing that. So the image that came to mind, and thank you, Dawn, for helping bring out this image because I'm loving it, is it's like being the first person to cross a swollen river,
Mhm.
right? So we can all imagine a swollen river. There's a group of people. You need to get to the other side. Um, Someone has to walk the rope across the river. Someone has to find the places to step, the stones that are solid, find the safe route through, right? And for me, being a leader is someone who willingly picks up that rope on behalf of everybody else and takes the very cautious, risk managed approach of finding where to step, etc. But at the same time, knowing that there's an entire group of people who are holding the other end of the rope should you slip and fall, but who still appreciate that you're willing to make those steps because ultimately the rope will get to the other side and then the crossing will become easier for other people, right? Um, and it's but it inherently says, I'm willing to risk my comfort or my safety or even my life, right, in order to advance the interests of the group as a whole, right, to make a new way, to make a new path, and to navigate risks, real risks, in order to make a new way, to blaze a trail, so to speak, right? And we all have it within us, right? We all have that ability within us. We can all tap that, and we all tap that in various situations. Position does not confer leadership. I mean, we know many examples of people who hold positions but don't exhibit leadership,
Mhm.
right? And candidly, there are some days when leading just isn't something I'm really into, right? It's just like I I just I don't necessarily have the energy to take this on today, right? But I will take it on most days for sure, right? And I hope, and I always try to take it on every single day that I'm called upon to do it, right? Um, but leadership can emerge anywhere, right? It's not tied to a position. It's not tied to um, anything. It's just an intrinsic belief that things can be better and that collectively, but with initiative, that a better situation can emerge, that a better path can emerge, that a different situation is there. So I've done a lot of talking. I'd like to pause and let you inject some questions.
Yeah. So, as a trailblazer, because you certainly are one, what are some of those key attributes that you call on within yourself, um, or key um, personal decisions that you've made to make the way easier? We chatted a little bit the other day. Um, about a particular individual that you felt if you were going to do this when you did this, that you wanted to be able to make sure that um, you confided in someone to put that out there to start leading the way.
Mhm.
um, can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe about those values and those um, tenacious elements within you that allowed you to do that?
Um, well, I think that the 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 beautiful story to share is that before I came out publicly, I did need support and advice from other people. And I did have to take the risk of bringing people into a circle of trust,
Mhm.
because I knew that I couldn't achieve this by myself successfully for myself or for my organizations, right? Of which really there were two stakeholder organizations that I was part of, both my firm and ILTA. And one of the people that I reached out to very, very early on was Joy Heath Rush, our beloved. beloved leader at ILTA. And but every time I'd reach out to someone, I went through this process of asking my intuition whether it was safe to reach out to someone, right? Whether it was safe to have a communication. And with joy, there was no concern, right? It was just all of the intuitive signaling that came back as like, there's no concern here, right? And truthfully, and there wasn't, of course, like Joy was an incredible help and wonderful support, through that process. And, and it's because her leadership is so heart-centered and creates so much safety for so many people, because she makes space for everybody, and people understand that, and they understand that intuitively, and she doesn't have judgment, right? She doesn't carry judgment with it. So, she's an example of someone who so fully manifests a quality of leadership that is it's just so needed, candidly, right? And yeah, so I get quite emotional talking about it, but the emotion is good emotion. It's one of heart and love and appreciation that,
Authenticity.
yeah, and authenticity
Yeah.
that comes from it, right? And I don't feel any shame showing emotion here, because I've shown that it's possible to be vulnerable and empowered at the same
At the
time.
same
So
time, that's right.
it's like,
Yeah.
there it is, right? I can be in that space. I know that space. I can be honest and vulnerable. And when you do that, there's a real strength that comes from that. There's a real strength that others can access and rely on, because we all struggle. We all struggle, and boy, are we all struggling more than anything else this year, right? This year, more than anything, has confronted all of us with things to discover and unearth within ourselves, within society, within community, to do that, right? So yeah.
We talked also a lot about your involvement with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusiveness Task Force, also known as DEITF, which is a little easier to say. And one of the things that was brought to my attention in a conversation that really resonated with me, is that it is a safe place for all.
Hmm.
And typically when we talk about a safe place for all, I I I'm not sure that all feels that, the
Hmm.
all part. And the statement of it being okay for allies,
Hmm.
who truly want to be allies, that it's a place also to be encouraged, um, to ask questions, and it's okay to make a mistake if your heart is in the right place, because so many people are afraid of offending, quite frankly, and they don't want to. They want to be authentic, and they want to be welcoming, and they want to have that safe space.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the DEITF, and for those who really do not know a whole lot about it, um, what that is like, and who is welcome, and what your mission and goals are.
Yeah, the the mission and goals are to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion front and center into the legal technology community. The from a business perspective, if if you haven't accepted the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion makes for good business, you should probably learn to read, right? Because there is a preponderance of evidence to show this. And I, you know, maintaining what we're trying to set up within the task force, what we're building within the task force, is a safe space in which things don't have to be smooth, right? No one says that it all has to be love and roses and kumbaya all the time, right? There's real differences in perspective that people bring. People bring all kinds of experiences and traumas to difference and their experience of difference within the world. But it's through that friction and allowing that friction to occur in a considered and managed way that alchemy occurs. And that alchemy produces teams of people who perform much better and higher because there is an implicit understanding of the value of difference of experience, right? And difference of experience and difference of perspective produces better solutions over time. The research shows this, the studies show this, etc. And legal technology as a discipline, as an area, is being challenged and disrupted in ways that are unparalleled. COVID is a dramatic example of the role that technology leadership has in law firms and corporate legal and other locations to really being the engines of innovation and growth for the organization, right? I mean, technology departments across the world have shown their capabilities and their brilliance navigating the COVID crisis and all of its sequelae, all of its follow-on conditions that it's produced as organizations are grappling with what is the workplace going to look like, to be there. We need all voices to be at the table providing their perspective because the opportunity now is to set the future for decades in the way that businesses are going to operate. And if there isn't that space created for diversity of perspective, for inclusion of perspective, there'll be a return to the past, and that will not serve the future of organizations, right? So I see so much intersection occurring now between what's happening within ILTA and the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, the raising of the profile, the education and everything that's happening around it, the background conversation that's happening in the country and the world with regard to so many issues around race and gender and all of these challenges. But then at the same time, businesses are reimagining themselves. They're saying, what does it mean to be a law firm? What does it mean to be a corporate legal department? What is going to be that future in 10 years from now? Going back to John Elber, right? He created the framework, the Law 2020 framework, which many of us will remember from the early part of the of I guess of this decade that's coming to an end now. And really we need a law 2025 and a law 2030 because the amount of change that's going to occur in the next 4 years and the next 9 years is going to be it's going to rock the foundations of the way that legal services are delivered. And managing that and staying above it and thriving within that environment requires all perspectives, and it requires that creativity and that friction to actually solve these issues, right? So, I'm just trying to tie it all together, but that's the moment that we're in right now. And I'm honored to be one of the people that's creating a space that this conversation can emerge into the community, and people can be touched by it and can find ways to better themselves and their organizations.
Wow. Jillian, if you could boil all of your legacy knowledge into one phrase or a wisdom nugget that you could share with others, what would that look like?
I say this repeatedly. I have tested for myself over the last 30 years the value of practice, right? And what I mean by practice is the 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 practice of returning to yourself, right? So often that is, quite characteristically framed in the, in the language of, of meditation or prayer, etc. But I believe it's actually far wider than that. It can be bird watching, it can be painting, it can be hiking, it can be building a table, anything that centers you as a person. It can be playing a piano, it can be doing a podcast, candidly, right? A recording. Anything that produces that quality for yourself needs to be part of your daily routine. Because if we're not grounded in our sense of silence, our sense of stillness within ourselves, our internal sense of balance, we can't navigate the change on the outside effectively. Right. I'm just restating ancient traditions in modern language here, and there's many traditions that talk about this dynamic. It is true, it remains true. It's the central component of it. Establish that practice, that thing which brings you to yourself. For many people it can be service, for many people it can be volunteering, it can be whatever it is, but ultimately it causes you to see yourself in a much more broader perspective as being part of something bigger, as a part of the whole. And through that, it gifts the ability to navigate change. It gives the ability to lead. It gives the ability to handle new situations and new complexities that you haven't encountered before. Without that, you're swept aside, right? The course of events, the course of history will sweep you aside. Find that rock, find that thing that centers you, and from there, strike out, right? I can't take the next step across the swollen river unless I'm standing on a firm rock. So you just keep
Yes.
doing that. You
Yes.
just keep doing that, right? Find your firm rock, take the next step, find the next firm rock. And that's what the practice is. It's that repetition of coming back to that solid rock, coming back to that stance. And it's open to everybody. There's no dogma involved here. Everybody, everybody, if they ask themselves, will know what I'm talking about. You know, that's the basis.
Well, Jillian, thank you for your inspiration, for your authenticity, and for your courage.
Mhm.
You are definitely a trailblazer, and thank you very much for being part of this and for being with me today.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dawn. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you. Bye bye.